This
As
conference will now be recorded.
is a second meeting of our Phase 1 residents. As you may know, there was a 10 a.m. meeting, and we are holding the second meeting at 4 o'clock for folks who could not attend the 10 a.m. meeting due to work schedules or other commitments or so forth. So glad that so many of you could join us this afternoon. We do have a good number of our staff with us. Unfortunately, Mr. Lundy, our CEO, was called away, but I am pleased to have joining with us Samantha Holmes, one of our social services coordinators and relocation specialists. I see Mr. Larry Gonzalez, our HCV officer, Carolyn Avington, our finance officer. We also have joining us Karis Hoff. She is one of our, she's our Ross coordinator and one of the relocation team members as well. We have Kiara Lovett. She is a relocation team member and a social services coordinator. And I also see Miriam Gonzalez Vega. She is one of the newest members of our relocation team, and she is also a social services coordinator with the Housing Authority. We also have joining us today as well Robin Adams, our asset management officer, and other staff. We have Michaela Gleason, our communications specialist, who is going to be coordinating the technical pieces of today's meeting. So just want to thank all of them for their attendance and participation. And of course, thank all of our residents from Phase 1 who are joining us today as well. This is going to be, we want to be respectful of your time, so we're going to keep the meeting very straightforward and to the point so that you can get from this the information that you need, ask any questions that you may have, certainly of me or of the team, and then hopefully use that information in your housing search or your housing transition, whether that's out into the general community or over to Phase 2. Again, just a little housekeeping, please. If you are joining, make sure that you mute yourself. You can do that by pressing the little microphone if you are joining us uh, virtually, pressing the little microphone at the bottom to mute yourself. I believe that if you are on phone, you can use *6 to mute yourself. Got that little tidbit this morning from one of our residents who walked us through that. So okay, the purpose of this meeting, as I said, is to bring you up to speed on where things stand with the relocation piece process for Phase 1. That is the portion of the property that is the right
Yeah.
side of the park.
That's all I had to do. That's all right
And,
there.
so there's a total of 97 units on that right side of the park. And so far, there have been ongoing folks moving out. I'm sure that you've seen that, those of you that are living in Phase 1. And we want to just let you know sort of like where we are in terms of relocation timelines, what's to be expected over the next few months when it comes to Phase 1. And those of you that choose to transition from Phase 1 to Phase 2, what may be in store for you as well. Also wanted to provide you some updates from our Housing Choice Voucher program and our public housing program when it comes to relocation, what the what the responsibilities are of our Phase 1 residents during either of those processes. Um, Samantha Holmes, our social services coordinator, will also provide some tips for those of you that are choosing to leave the St. Petersburg Housing Authority jurisdiction. Maybe you want to move with family across the country. Maybe you're porting out of St. Petersburg, perhaps to Tampa, because there are more apartments to your liking or so forth. There's certainly some considerations, and Ms. Holmes is going to give you some tips and ideas that you may want to really think about in that path. And I know that excuse me, Mr. Gonzalez, our HCV officer, will weigh in with his expertise as well from his department. And toward the end, of course, there'll be time for question and answer, any comments. Certainly, we want to hear from our residents in regards to what challenges, if any, you may be running into. Are there things that you would like for us as the Housing Authority to think about as we continue through this process? Certainly, I don't think any of us envisioned we would be doing this during a global pandemic, and all of the sort of turbulence that comes with what's going on in our community and in our country right now. But we have to adjust and we have to tweak as we need to as circumstances on the ground change. So please do feel free to give us your comments and feedback. So that if we need to pivot and our approach, we can definitely do that. So that being said, thank you so much again to everyone for joining the relocation update. Basically, we're focusing right now on phase 1 of Jordan Park. Again, that's the right side of the park. We will need to make sure that we vacate everyone from phase 1. That's our primary concern at this point, and Ms. Abington, our finance officer, will go into some of those timelines. But for folks who are relocating from phase 1, there are, again, a couple of options. Many of you have already received your voucher and maybe seeking to use that voucher out in the private sector. You've attended your briefings, you've met with your relocation specialist, and you've received some guidance on that piece. Others of you may be choosing to relocate, not using your voucher, but maybe relocate to phase 2. And that's the other half of the property. Those of you that are relocating to phase 2 will need to bear in mind that you will need to move again within the next year in order for the renovation activities to take place in phase 2. Much like we cannot renovate round your heads and have you in the units in phase 1, we similarly cannot do the renovations, the significant renovations to phase 2 while people are living in those units. So if you relocate from phase 1 to phase 2, within the next year, you will need to move again. So please take that into consideration when you are meeting and speaking with your relocation specialist and thinking about what works best for you and your family. Additionally, another option may be if you don't want to move from phase 1 to phase 2, you may seek to move to another public housing unit in our portfolio. Now, mind you, there has to be a vacant unit for you to transfer or to move into. We cannot kick people out of our other public housing units in order to relocate someone from phase 1 into those units. So please be mindful that we will do our very best to work with everyone. And if we can give you provide you a unit in your preferred public housing community, we will definitely seek to do so while still abiding by all of the appropriate HUD guidelines. However, if there is not a vacant unit available in your preferred public housing community, you will need to look at what other options are available to you. It is the Housing Authority's responsibility to make sure that we offer and provide you with a unit as a result of you being relocated, but we're not going to be able to meet everyone's requests or because, again, we cannot kick people out to move other people in. So just something to think about, again, as you're having those discussions with your relocation specialist, with the team. They can let you know what units are available in what public housing communities, and then again, you can make the decision that's best for you and your family. Continuing on, so in terms of the relocation update, as I mentioned, our focus is on phase 1 at this point. It is going to be imperative that if you have not already met with your relocation specialist, that you do so immediately. Time is of the essence, and so we really need everyone who has not met with their relocation specialist to do so within the next week so that arrangements can be made for your family to vacate from phase 1. When I speak about time being of the essence, I'm going to ask our finance officer, Carolyn Abington, to weigh in on some of those timelines at this point so that all of you who are on this call can know specifically what you're looking at when it comes to needing to vacate. Ms. Abington?
Yes. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can. We
Yes,
can
I
hear you
can hear
clearly.
you.
Thank you. Okay, so we need everybody to be out of phase one by September 30th. So we noticed we would have preferred everybody to be out by August 31st, but time is what time is. So now it's September 30th. We're set to close in the middle of October. We cannot close while people are still in residence in phase one. So we need everybody out by September 30th. As Ms. Thomas said, you have choices. You can take a voucher and you can take a public housing unit, but you can only have what is available. So I would highly encourage you to be looking for the voucher, because when you go to phase two, within a year or shorter, you're going to have to move to phase one. If you go if you take a voucher and you go out, you'll be out there for a year, but in a year we'll have units that are coming back online, and you'll be able to then, if you wanted to go to phase one, go back to phase one.
Ms. Abington,
Yes.
can I ask you to just clarify? You said that if you move to phase two, then within a year you'd have to move to phase one.
Well, you could move to phase one, or you could you're going to have to move regardless. So
okay. So someone living in phase two, sorry.
And it might be sooner than a year. So if phase one goes all well and good and construction commences and ends, which it's scheduled to end August of 22, but if it ends in June of 22, we're going to have started moving people out of phase one long before that. So if you're looking not to have to move and then move again in 6 months and then move again, you might want to take a voucher and move for a year and then have the ability to come back to phase one or phase two once it's completed. Like you will get a preference. I'm not going to say you're automatically able to get in, but if you're in the Section 8 program, it's easier to transition. And let's just be clear, there's going to be no public housing left at Jordan Park. Everybody's going to be on Section 8. Whether you take a voucher or whether you stay there and get in the voucher program through Project Base, you will be on Section 8. So public housing will no longer exist in Jordan Park as you know it today.
Thank you. That's a really important point.
Right, and you still have to qualify for the Section 8 program. And some of those things are make sure, and everybody's going to reiterate these to you throughout it, because I know when Ms. Adams gets up, she's going to say the same thing. Make sure you don't have the lease violations. Make sure you pay your rent on time. Make sure you do everything that you're supposed to do to be the good tenant that we know you are. Please keep with that.
Thank you. And that's a thank you for underscoring that point. Public housing right now, phase one and phase two of Jordan Park are still on the public housing platform. That's their public housing. There's public housing regulations and guidelines that staff have to follow and that our residents have to follow. However, once the phase one is vacated, once the last resident leaves phase one and is completely empty, that half of the property will be transitioning to the project-based voucher platform. So that is, again, that's a voucher platform. There's similarities to public housing, and I say similarities, but it is not the exact same. And so there's going to be differences that between the two programs that will require some very clear, I guess, details which will be provided to you by your voucher specialist and so forth at that time. So that's half of the property, and then when phase two gets emptied, then phase two will then also transition to the project-based voucher platform. So to Ms. Abington's point, there will be no more public housing left at Jordan Park at all. The senior building, the 60 units, that also will be completely project-based voucher as well. So all of those are things that you might want to be thinking about and may want to consider. If you truly want to be in solely public housing, then you would need to determine whether or not there is a vacant unit at another one of our other public housing properties. And if so, if there is a vacant unit, does it meet your family size and so forth? So that's a really important point. Ms. Abington, you mentioned that phase two would be ready for, can you say it again, what you said, the timeline?
Yes.
So everyone has to be out of phase one by September 30th. We need everyone vacated from phase one by September 30th. What about the timeline for phase two?
So phase 2 is scheduled to start in August of 22, when
When you
phase
say
1 is
start, you mean the
scheduled.
construction?
Yes, that means everybody will be out of that phase well before August. So my guess is the last person's going to move out of phase 2 sometime in July of 22. It
Okay,
will be prior to that. It will be that time frame or prior, because phase 2 must be vacated for phase before we can start it. The same way phase 1 has to be vacated before we can start it. Now,
so,
as the buildings in phase 1 are available, we will be transitioning the people from phase 2 into phase 1 if they qualify. Because
okay.
again, you still have to qualify for the program. You still need to maintain all of the things that keep you in good standing with the housing authority. And I cannot underscore that. And I know Robin's going to, but please do so.
Thank you. And so that is going to be important information that for the residents to think about, because it's not, as you mentioned before, while you will have a preference for phase two, meaning that, that might mean that your application perhaps gets reviewed a little bit more quickly than someone who doesn't have the preference. It does not guarantee that you will be able to just transfer from phase two to phase one. You will still have to go through the application and screening process for the project-based voucher program that will apply to phase one. So that good standing, that compliance is going to be key.
Yes, and it's very, very important, because right now, phase 1 is public housing and phase 2 is public housing. We're just transferring you over. It's not a big deal. It's not the same coming back.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. And certainly, again, if folks have questions or concerns, you can feel free to put those questions in the chat, or you might want to write that question down and hold it until we open it up for the open forum for Q&A. But I can read questions anonymously as needed, so that we can make sure we get those answers to you. Please don't hesitate to ask questions. This meeting is being recorded and will be up on our website within the next 24 to 48 hours. So anyone who did not attend this morning's meeting at 10 o'clock and who did not attend this afternoon's meeting will get the benefit of the information still. So any questions you may ask may help somebody else. Thank you again, Ms. Abington, appreciate that. So let's talk about relocation options right now. For that end, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Larry Gonzalez, our Housing Choice Voucher, officer. Mr. Gonzalez?
Thank you, Ms. Thomas, and thank you all for attending this virtual meeting. For those that have a voucher and are looking for units, your voucher sheet has 28 zip codes listed and the rents you would qualify for in each of those zip codes. Keep in mind some tips to look with your voucher sheet. Pick three zip codes that you may want to live in and search for units in those. The top 3 may not have a lot of units available. So if they don't and you're running out of time, go to another 3 zip codes, check those out to see the availability. It's going to be, St. Pete's difficult to find units right now, but it's not impossible. We are continuing to receive folk are continuing to find units, and we're continuing to receive the paperwork in order to move them out of Jordan Park and into the units. And we're getting those on a daily basis. So people are finding units in the St. Petersburg area. It just, as I had mentioned in the briefings last month, it's going to take a lot of effort on your part to find that unit. Constantly calling, constantly looking for the units. So it takes a great deal of effort, especially now in the St. Petersburg area. Along with that being said, use and please you get the support and use the support of the relocation caseworkers as well as the Section 8 staff here in trying to find a unit. If you're questioning a landlord, or the landlord has some questions on the security deposits and so forth, have them contact a caseworker, your relocation caseworkers, and they can assist you in speaking on behalf of you for you, or speaking for you to the landlord regarding any kind of questions they may have, especially if they're new to the program. Most landlords in St. Pete, there's a lot of landlords that are already familiar with the program, but this is a little different in that we're paying for the security deposits. The St. Pete Housing Authority is paying for the security deposits, application fees, and so forth. So if you're having difficulty explaining that to the landlord, please have them contact your relocation specialist, and hopefully they can assist you, or they will assist you, or if not, we can, one of the Section 8 staff will assist. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Gonzalez. And you raised some really important points there about maintaining that contact. Your relocation specialists can be great advocates for you, and they are great. They have a wealth of information for landlords who maybe need to figure out how to navigate this program where SPHA pays for the security deposit. So please do utilize them. Ms. Holmes, our social services coordinator, is going to weigh in right now in regards to the voucher when it comes to porting, leaving St. Petersburg, leaving our jurisdiction and going someplace else, with some best tips and practices. Ms. Holmes?
All right, thank you, and thank you all again for joining us this afternoon. So during this housing search, some have decided right off the bat that they wanted to leave the area, and some are choosing later on as they are finding it either hard to find what it is that they really want in this area. So they're deciding to transfer or port their vouchers to a different city, state, county, however you see fit. But just know that during this process, it does take time, effort, and planning. Porting your voucher doesn't happen overnight. And so I'm just going to go over a couple tips to kind of help you through this process. So the first thing you want to do is do some research on the housing authority in that area that governs the city or state or county that you're wanting to transfer to. That's going on their website, looking at, sometimes they post the different zip codes and rent amounts. You can also find out who the actual portability specialist is, or the intake specialist, and you can reach out to them and ask them questions. Some of the things you can ask are, once your information is ported from St. Pete Housing Authority to the new housing authority, how long does it take for you to get your voucher? And that's a good question, because every housing authority processes their things differently. Some take longer than others. So you just want to make sure that your contact information is updated with your relocation specialist, because once we submit the portability form to the Housing Choice Voucher program here, they then transfer the information to the new housing authority. And then that housing authority gets in contact with you to schedule your briefing. Any other questions that you may have, you can ask whomever the HCV housing specialist is at that time. When you port out, you have to also turn in the voucher that the St. Pete Housing Authority gave you. So you can't have two vouchers. And so just make sure that if you decide to leave, or you're deciding to port, that you turn in the current voucher to your relocation specialist. Another thing to be mindful of is, when you did receive your voucher from the St. Pete Housing Authority, at the very top, there are 2 dates, and one of them has an expiration date. So just because you port your voucher to a different city or state or county does not mean your time starts over. That the clock is still ticking, and so whatever the date is that's on there as your expiration date still stands. So you have to take that in mind when you only have 2-3 weeks left in order to be out of either phase 1 or phase 2. when that happens. So just take that into consideration. But the good thing about it is you can request an extension the week of your expiration date. So if it expires 9/13, you want to put in a request via email to whomever your HCB counselor is at the top, whether it's Ms. Whitaker or I believe Ms. Manning. You would want to email them the request, because they then in return email you back with the approval and the new date. You can then print that out and keep it with you, so that when you come across a landlord and they look at your voucher and they say, well, it expired on the 13th, you could say, no, it was approved for an extra however many days, and this is the new expiration date, so that then you can continue on with your housing search. I believe that's all that I have for you today.
All right, thank you very much. And we really appreciate those tips, because we know that there's several residents in phase 1 and phase 2 that are interested in porting out. And so hopefully this information was helpful to those of you that are looking to transition to another location. For Mr. Gonzalez, we did receive a question about what is the difference and how different will it be between the project-based voucher program that will oversee Jordan Park after the renovations and currently public housing. Can you speak to, and perhaps if Ms. Adams wants to join in as well, speak to some of the differences between the public housing program and the project-based voucher program that residents may notice?
They're very similar to the public housing, to the current public housing rules and regulations. So 30% of the income is calculated for the rents, and it's more similar to how public housing is run than how the voucher program is how a voucher is used. They're not going to see that much change in the efforts to for maintenance efforts and so forth. Not much change at all.
Are there any changes in the screening processes between public housing and project-based voucher?
The screening would be that would be similar to what is in Section 8 right now, and it's 2 misdemeanors, 1 felony within 5 years, and a lot of, and again, any prior lease violations, any public housing debt that one may have would not make them eligible for the program. So we will run a background check as when the project's ready to take in move-ins and folk go back to Jordan Park. We will run a background check. We will run what's called an EIV check, where it checks for any public housing debt or any debt owed to other agencies. So those will be taking place prior to moving in or being accepted to move in.
So if I hear you correctly, you're saying that if a resident who may be living in phase 2 of Jordan Park, and let's say they have unpaid rent or other charges, they may be not allowed, they may be ineligible to go into the project-based voucher section of Jordan Park because of those monies that are owed to their public housing program.
That is absolutely correct.
So
HUD has again the EIV form, which tracks debts or any terminations or anything like that we are required to run prior to admission into the Section 8 program. So and a debt as small as $10 may keep you off the program. So pay the rents, pay the debts prior to leaving.
Okay, and thank you so much, because I think that's one of the differences to the person who asked the question. Right now, we can move you from phase 1 to phase 2, just do that public housing transfer pretty easily because you're still within the same program. That is not an option that's going to be available to you once you're looking to leave phase 2, or once you're looking to come from another public housing unit and return back to Jordan Park. You will not be eligible for phase 1, the renovated portion of the property, if you owe any money to the public housing program. That is a major change there. So thank you very much, Mr. Gonzalez, for that. I'm going to turn to Robin Adams, our asset management officer, who's also going to weigh in at this time. Certainly you can speak to the previous topic, but also if you want to talk specifically about the public housing transfer process, that'd be much appreciated. Ms. Adams?
Thank you very much, Ms. Thomas. Yes, I do want to talk about the transfer process. So residents, if when you're working with your relocation specialist, you choose to relocate or transfer to another public housing unit, either in phase 2 or in another public housing development, it's very important that you know that you must be a resident in good standing in order to do that. So what is a resident in good standing? And I think everyone has talked about that a little bit. It means that you've paid your rent and you've paid your rent on time. It means that you are lease compliant, and that's with all the portions of your lease. So residents really need to read that lease, know that lease. If you have any questions about it, call the management office. We'd be happy to explain it to you. But in particular, housekeeping can be an issue that could cause you a problem. Your behavior here at Jordan Park or in other places, especially arrests or things like that, can definitely have an effect on your tenancy at Jordan Park. The lease is very specific about this, and I encourage you to take a look at the lease and the community rules to make sure you understand what you are required to do in order to be a resident at Jordan Park and to receive subsidy. The other thing that's very important is that you complete your annual recertification process. So even if you have been issued a voucher, as long as you have not moved out of your apartment here at Jordan Park, you must recertify. So that process starts kind of early. You may have received a packet. Maybe your recertification date is October 1st or sometime in the future, and you think you're going to be gone by then. Regardless, continue that process. Turn in that paperwork and be sure that we can process you. It can help you in a lot of ways. If you get a job, if you get an increase, or you make more money, or you get a second job, be sure you come in and tell us right away. You have 10 days to tell us, but that increase in income may help you with your voucher. So be sure that you tell us everything, just like the lease says. You still have to report income changes. You still have to report changes in your family composition within 10 days of a change. So that's important. It doesn't go away just because you've been issued a voucher. You still have to keep that information up to date in order to be lease compliant. The other thing I want you to make sure everybody understands, that as the phase 2 and AMP2 public housing units vacate, management and maintenance are working diligently to complete unit turns so that those units are available for people who want to stay in Jordan Park or who want to move to another public housing unit. That can take some time, so you really need to stay in close contact with your relocation specialist, because we are all communicating and making sure we're all up to date on the latest information on available units, so that transfer can be completed efficiently, quickly, and as painlessly as possible. So please stay in communication as much as possible. I don't think they'll get mad if you call them every day. I don't know. I can't speak for them, but be sure that they know what's going on with you at all times, and they will let you know when a unit becomes available. So if there are any questions, remember you have to be in good standing, rent paid, lease compliant, and you have to complete your annual recertifications and tell us within 10 days if there are any changes to your income or your family.
Thank you very much, Ms. Adams. That was really helpful information. And thank you for underscoring, much like Mr. Gonzalez and Ms. Abington did, the importance of remaining in compliance, because that can really derail your smooth transition out of phase one if some of those issues crop up. So if you think that you have some issues or challenges, reach out to your property management team, resolve any tenancy issues that you think you may have now. Don't wait until September 29th to then say, maybe now's the time to have a discussion with my property manager. No, the time to have that discussion was actually 3 weeks ago, but there's no time like the present to have those tenancy discussions. I've received another excellent question. Can we move back into our same unit when it's complete if I choose to move back? That is a fantastic question, and the answer is actually no. I'm going to let Ms. Abington, she actually spoke quite profusely about this during our earlier meeting at 10 a.m. Ms. Abington, please respond as to why the question about can a tenant from phase one move back into their exact same unit once the renovations are complete if they choose to move back.
Well, it's generally it's the phase two people who aren't going to get their units. I will say in phase one, there's an opportunity, but the way that they're going to offer the units, it's going to be there in the resident selection plan. We'll go through and offer the units as they come online. So basically, if we offer you a unit, I don't suggest you turn it down because it's not the unit that you originally wanted, because then you kind of go to the bottom. So, you know, like we might have to offer you units 3 times before we take you off of our list. I have to review the selection plan because I don't remember the number of times that I'm going to offer, but I can just tell you that there's an offering that will take place. And just suggesting, if you're a phase one person who moves off property and wants to come back, that you don't turn down a unit because it's not the same unit that you had previously, because the chances of you getting offered that unit are not, it's not good. Because you might then have to wait until phase two is completely done, and then you're not even in phase one now, you're in phase two. Again, if you're in, and I supposedly this is just for phase one people, but if you're in phase two, you're not going to get your unit either, because you're going to move over to phase one. And once we give you a unit in phase one, we're not going to move you to phase two. The only reason we would make such a change would be a reasonable accommodation. That would be the only reason we would let you have a unit in one and then move you to two at a different point in time, the same way we would do for anybody with a reasonable accommodation. So not likely that you're going to get the same unit in either phase. And I would highly suggest, if you're offered a unit, you don't turn it down.
Thank you very much. And I think that it's really important to recognize that the construction schedule, the way that construction happens on a large property like this, is that the construction team will complete, you know, perhaps a couple of buildings here at a time. Those all those units will be renovated, and then they'll move on to another couple of apartments or a couple of buildings, and those will be completed, and then they'll move on to it. So it's going to be sort of like that. And so, to Ms. Abington's point, once they complete the first set of buildings, and perhaps, you know, you've applied and you're offered a unit in the first set of buildings that are completed, it would be unwise, to Ms. Abington's point, to say, you know what, I'm going to turn this down and wait for when my original unit is going to be ready. Because again, there is no guarantee that you will actually even get the chance to be offered that your original unit. So I hope to our questioner that provides you with some guidance that it would not be advisable. Is there a slight chance perhaps that timing may work out and that you may get offered the exact same unit that you originally vacated? It's possible, but is it likely? Probably not. And so you may not want to hinge your relocation on something that really isn't that likely. I hope that answers your question. And of course, again, feel free to comment in the chat or ask further questions in the chat, you can always send them privately, and I will keep them anonymous so that way we can make sure you get your question answered.
Miss-
Yes, Ms. Adams?
Hi, this is Robin Adams again. And I would also like to note that you may be in a unit that's too large for you because we had to put you in the unit that was available to relocate you from phase 1. So if you really like that, let's say you only qualify for a 2-bedroom unit, but you're in a 3 and you like it, you're not going to be able to return to the 3 because we're going to right size you when you move into your permanent apartment. So that's another reason that you need to consider when you're thinking that you might try to aim for the unit that you were in before.
That is a great point. So when it comes to occupancy guidelines and so forth, thank you, Ms. Adams. Again, the Housing Authority, what we want to do is make sure that we are using these limited resources that we have in the most efficient and effective way possible to serve as many families as possible. So by that token, it's not necessarily that fair for someone perhaps who is currently, as Ms. Adams indicated, is currently in a 3-bedroom, but only really needs a 2, for us to then return that person to another 3-bedroom when we have other people who could definitely use a 3-bedroom. They've got 3, 4 people in the household, and the original household only has 2. We've got to be fair. We've got to make the best use of these resources. Similarly, when it comes to folks who may be currently in a 2-bedroom, but they're only 1 person, we're going to be right sizing those folks as well, because again, we have families, we have parents with small children, parents with a few children, 2 children, who may need that 2-bedroom much more so than a single person who maybe just needs room for extra furniture. So we're just trying to make the best use of these limited resources. And we hope, again, we can continue to have these conversations, but we will be right sizing. I really appreciate Ms. Adams highlighting that point, people, so that we can make the best use. I think I just want to ask Mr. Gonzalez to weigh in as well when it comes to vouchers, and just underscore sort of maybe some of the differences that folks may be experiencing when it comes to the size unit that they may be in, but what do they actually qualify for voucher-wise? Is there some differences in that determination?
Yeah, we normally stick to 2 heartbeats per room to determine the bedroom size. So if you have 2 kids that are male, female, and 5 or 6 years old, you would be eligible for a 2-bedroom. It's not that we're telling you where the kids sleep. It's just that's the way to determine the voucher size. There's some instances where we would issue in those kind of family situations a 3-bedroom, but we kind of tend to stick to the 2 heartbeats per room to determine the voucher size.
Okay. Oh, well, and I appreciate that clarity. Thank you so much. So that's a little bit of a difference when it comes to from the public housing piece. We've got a little bit more wiggle room when it comes to our occupancy guidelines. However, because we are trying to right size those families that when we're doing these transfers and so forth, we're going to be really abiding by the public housing occupancy guidelines that we've received from HUD. And so again, putting someone who's a single person into a 2-bedroom because maybe that's what they're in now after the renovations, that's not what we're going to be doing moving forward. So please be mindful of that and have those conversations with your relocation team member. Thank you very much for the great questions that have been coming in. We would like to, at this point, it's 4:45.
Well, I do want to say one more thing, and this is, when they're talking about the difference and you're talking about putting people in the right size, now is the time to understand that when you go to phase 1 and it's project-based voucher, the right size is, as Mr. Gonzalez said, 2 heartbeats to a room. So just because you have the 3-bedroom, because you have the 2 children and yourself, or 3 children, whatever, it might be that when you get to phase 1, you're down a bedroom size, because that's now the right size for the project-based voucher.
Thank you. So, and just to put a finer point on that, what Ms. Abington is saying is that, let's say that you transition, you leave phase 1 and move to phase 2, and you're in public housing and you're in a 3-bedroom. Okay. If you look to move back to phase 1 after the renovations, and your house, depending upon your household size, you may not get that 3-bedroom, because they're going to look at what the voucher amount or what the voucher size is that's appropriate for your household, and that is what you will get. So just because you're in a 3-bedroom in public housing, when you move from phase 1 to phase 2 for your transfer, if you look to go back to phase 1 after the renovations, you very well could lose that additional bedroom size. That is an excellent point. Thank you, Ms. Abington. Again, things to talk about, things to consider. We want to make sure that you have this information so that you can make the best choices for your family, and move in the way that is going to, for long term, have the least amount of negative impact. So thank you, Ms. Abington. Are there other questions? You can, if you want to unmute yourself, you can press *6 if you're on the phone. If you would like to type your questions into the chat, you can do that as well, and I will read them anonymously. But this is your time to give any questions, comments, any challenges in locating housing that we need to be aware of so that we can assist you. Well, and certainly we know that some folks may not want to ask these questions out loud, perhaps. So if you would prefer to convey your questions or concerns to your relocation team member and then have those questions answered, we can do it that way as well, if that's what you feel more comfortable with. We just want to give you this time to voice any questions or concerns that may be out there so that you get accurate information directly from the housing authority. You don't have to rely on information from outside sources or anywhere. You can get it directly from us. Any questions or comments? Okay, I'm going to assume that that very long pause of silence means that there is no one who has questions at this point that they'd like to share. So again, knowing it's getting close to dinner time, want to be respectful of your schedule, of all of our residents. So I will just say thank you so much to our residents who have joined this call. This virtual meeting, like the 10 a.m. meeting that we held this morning, are going to be available online on our website, stpetha.org, where you can go to the Jordan Park redevelopment webpage for all the latest information regarding the relocation process and the redevelopment process. That's where you will get accurate information again. And we will hold meetings tomorrow for our phase 2 households at 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. respectively as well. So just want to thank everyone for taking time out of your busy days to come here, ask these questions, get this information. Please reach out to your relocation team. Want to thank all of the relocation team and our executive staff, our Jordan Park staff, and our communication staff for helping put this meeting together. Please, everyone, continue to stay safe and be well during these times. We want to make sure that this process, as turbulent as it is, that we can be a support to you. But please look after yourselves and the health and well-being of yourselves and your families. Please take good care. The meeting is now adjourned.
Have a good one.
You too. Thank you.